So, how much will our share be? Considering how stingy Dad is, it must be a lot, right? Exactly. I've already ordered various things to prepare for my marriage with that money. Despite the recent completion of the month memorial service for their deceased father, his stepchildren cling to his inheritance without mourning. However, they can only laugh about it for now. As I muttered to myself, the phrase from a letter delivered 2 weeks after my husband, who had suddenly passed away from illness, crossed the Rainbow Bridge, resurfaced in my mind. Please read this hidden from my stepchildren. My name is Megan Brown, and I am 55 years old. I work as the first female manager at a local community bank. Currently, I live with my husband Daniel, a university associate professor of the same age, and our son Kyle, who just started middle school this fall. However, Daniel also has 3 children from his previous marriage to Angela. At the time Daniel and I married 16 years ago, his eldest son, Tony, and his second son, Nathan, were deep in their teenage years, ages 16 and 14, respectively. Additionally, his daughter Kristen was just 10 years old, so after Daniel's remarriage, she continued to live with her mother, Angela, just as before. Knowing Daniel was divorced with children, I married him with the intention of not breaking the bond between him and his children from his ex-wife. However, Daniel would often say, "I appreciate your concern, but Angela and I divorced 9 years ago, and since then, the children have been living with her parents." As a result, the children never visited our new apartment, nor did Daniel visit them. This was also the case at their school entrance ceremonies, graduations, and recitals. It didn't seem like he was sneaking out without telling me. At first, I thought, since I am just the new wife and not their stepmother, I should not meddle too much. However, I couldn't help but feel that Daniel's attitude towards his children was too indifferent, even though he is kind, compassionate, and thoughtful. After some hesitation, I brought it up, but he just chuckled and said, "It's not because of our remarriage." After the divorce, the kids preferred living at their grandparents' place, and they really don't want me around. So, I had no choice but to back down. Moreover, about a year after marrying Daniel, I unexpectedly became pregnant, and amidst the daily busyness, it was all too easy to forget about his children with his ex-wife, a fact that was undeniable. After Kyle was born, Daniel and I were caught up in the whirlwind of balancing new parenthood and our careers, so Daniel's children from his previous marriage naturally became a lesser priority. However, one Sunday, without any prior notice, Daniel's 3 children were brought to our apartment by their mother, Angela. At first, I didn't recognize the woman on the intercom, but behind me, Daniel's face visibly changed, and he asked in a tone I had never heard before. "What do you want?" Angela, undeterred, replied in a relaxed tone. "Well, a cute little brother has been born to them, so we thought we'd come and celebrate." And smiled broadly at the monitor. Ultimately, we were compelled to invite the 4 of them in. Even after handing over the gifts for the baby, Angela, while watching Daniel grit his teeth, said, "Oh, what a cute child, getting chubby. He must take after his mom." And commented on the cramped size of the apartment. "It's a good location but quite cramped, isn't it?" "Well, it's fine for a modest family of 3, but I couldn't handle it, it feels too suffocating." She then proceeded to open various storage doors around the place, intrusively entering Daniel's study and my room. When she tried to enter our bedroom, I finally protested, and she replied with a dismissive laugh. "Oh, did that offend you? Sorry then." Despite this tension, Angela behaved as if nothing was wrong, while the children, especially the older 2, simply sat on the living room couch, engrossed in their game consoles and phones. Kristen, too, casually watched TV and ate snacks she had brought from the kitchen. Noticing my gaze, she smiled just like Angela and said to the sleeping baby Kyle in his crib, "You're not giving sweets to the baby, right?" Before pushing the half-eaten snacks towards his mouth. This caused Kyle to burst into tears, and even as I rushed to comfort him, Daniel's stern reprimand seemed to have no effect on her. The older 2 continued to completely ignore everything around them. Seeing Angela and her children's behavior, I felt a foreboding sense of unease. I was shocked by their attitude, but after they left, Daniel made a request to Angela's parents, and since then, we have had no sudden visits and have been living a peaceful daily life. However, as Kyle was preparing to start elementary school, I suddenly began to worry about Kristen, realizing she was about to graduate from high school, being 12 years older than Kyle. Since that incident, Daniel had told me, "Megan, you don't need to involve yourself with Angela and the kids anymore." So, I had stayed away. But as Kyle became less demanding and our life rhythm stabilized, I found myself feeling more compassionate towards Daniel's children, regretting perhaps not being understanding enough, thinking they might have felt robbed of their father. So, I talked to Daniel about celebrating Kristen's university entrance, even if attending her graduation wasn't possible. Initially hesitant, Daniel eventually said, "If you're hesitating because of me, don't worry about it. I would like you to support Kristen and the others just as we do Kyle." Adding this, perhaps Daniel had been concerned deep down as well, because he then contacted Angela. Upon learning that Kristen had been accepted into university, he directly called to congratulate her and asked what she would like as a celebration gift. Kristen then requested, "If you're going to celebrate, I'd love to have a meal with all the siblings, wouldn't that be nice?" Initially surprised to include Kyle in, Daniel and I were nonetheless pleased by this sign of mutual growth and reserved Kristen's chosen restaurant. Daniel and I were nonetheless pleased by this sign of mutual growth and reserved Kristen's chosen restaurant. I initially had no intention of participating, but Tony, the eldest son who had graduated from university and was working at the city hall, urged me, saying, "I think Kyle might feel uncomfortable suddenly surrounded only by adults, so please join us." Persuaded by his request, I decided to attend as well. The celebration meal turned out to be a joyful occasion, with Kyle getting along well with his much older siblings, Tony and Nathan. As they left, the three siblings apologized for their past rudeness and expressed a wish to maintain a good relationship with Kyle, moving Daniel and me to tears. After Nathan passed his medical licensing exam, Daniel's birthday celebrations, and Kristen's coming-of-age ceremony, gatherings with the three siblings and our family became more frequent. Moreover, when Tony retired from his city hall job to run for city council, Daniel and I utilized all our connections to support him. Although we couldn't provide financial support for the campaign, we did everything possible, such as distributing flyers for lectures, creating leaflets, serving coffee in the office, and assisting with street speeches. When Tony was elected as the youngest and with the highest votes to the city council, Daniel and I were truly delighted. However, it seems that the winds had begun to change around that time. As a council member, Tony was quickly praised in the media as a handsome politician bringing a fresh breeze to local politics, and he rapidly became arrogant. "When you're as significant as me, all sorts of riffraff try to get close. It's best to ignore those who aren't useful," he would say, unabashedly showing a disturbing willingness to sort people into categories. Even when Daniel reprimanded him, Tony wouldn't listen and snapped back. "Don't you dare preach at me. Even Dad is of no use to me," leaving us both speechless. Sometime later, Kristen contacted me directly via social media wanting to meet. I rushed to the specified cafe, where she immediately asked, "Megan, you're a manager at the local bank, right?" and then requested that I use my connections to hire her. Indeed, I am the first female manager at the bank, but I'm not involved in HR. Moreover, there are no nepotism slots in our new graduate hiring process. I carefully explained. "I don't know who told you, but our bank does not hire new graduates based on connections. If there are any connections, it might only be for part-time positions at branches." However, Kristen was not satisfied and exclaimed angrily, "What? Can't even do a simple favor for your husband's children because you're just the stepmother?" She then sneered. "Just like Mom said, only a woman who'd marry such a scumbag would be a freeloader." Her eyes were the same as the day we first met, when she tried to push her half-eaten candy into baby Kyle's mouth. Chilled by this realization, I was left speechless as Kristen haughtily said, "I'll definitely get back at you for this," before storming off. After parting ways with Kristen, I struggled with when to share the story with Daniel, unable to find the right moment. About a month later, Daniel revealed to me, "I've had some concerning results from my health screening and need to go back for further tests. The doctors said they would like you to be there when they discuss the results." Shocked, I rushed to the hospital. There, the doctor informed us, "Unfortunately, it is stage 4 cancer." I fought the darkness overwhelming my vision and inquired about treatment options, but the doctor merely shook his head, indicating that there was little they could do, and suggested that hospice care might be the next step. Both Daniel and I were so shocked that day that we barely remember how we walked home. As I lay awake that night, I thought, I can't just accept this and back down. Maybe another hospital or a different doctor could take on Daniel's treatment. Inspired by this determination, I asked my boss for some time off and began seeking second opinions. However, every hospital and every renowned doctor I visited gave us the same prognosis. Even worse, Daniel, who had been accompanying me to these appointments, started to breathe heavily from exhaustion. Seeing this, I realized my own arrogance and was feeling down when Daniel said, "Megan, I appreciate your feelings, and it's hard to think about leaving Kyle behind. But if my time is limited, I'd rather not spend it on treatments. I want to use it for something else." 2 months later, Daniel passed away quietly, having spent his remaining days in his own way. Though I kept my emotions in check, Tony and his 2 siblings did not show up for Daniel's funeral at all. However, Daniel was surrounded by Kyle and me, and those who truly mourned him, and perhaps that was enough for him. On the day of the month memorial service, Tony and his siblings appeared suddenly without any prior notice. They barely participated in the incense burning before asking, "So, how much is our share?" Nathan and Kristen were also smirking, likely harboring the same intentions. It was utterly despicable. However, in my bag on my lap, there was a letter that Daniel had sent 2 weeks after he had crossed the Rainbow Bridge. Please read this hidden from my stepchildren. When he wrote this, Daniel must have had a premonition that things would turn out this way. I felt it was time to confront the 3 of them, who were looking at me with scornful smiles. Despite the unexpected visit from Tony and his siblings, I managed to get through the memorial service without issue. Turning to the 3, I said, "It's strange to talk about money at a place like this. You'll be contacted by our lawyer soon about the details." I handed them the business card of the lawyer I had prepared beforehand and left the scene. 2 days later, the law firm contacted me saying, "The other party has requested an urgent meeting, so we would like to arrange a discussion for tomorrow afternoon, if possible." The following day, I arrived at the law office at the agreed time, and Tony and his 2 siblings were already there, waiting for me. Without much preamble, we moved to a private room to start the discussion. Tony, grinning slyly, leaned forward and asked, "So? Since you're his wife, you're entitled to half the inheritance, right? But what about our share of the remaining half?" He then slid a copy of a local newspaper from 2 years ago across the table. The headline read, "New station location decided." I noticed Tony, Nathan, and Kristen all watching me with sly grins, trying to gauge my reaction. I see. It seemed Daniel's prediction had been sadly accurate. As I picked up the newspaper, I challenged Tony. "You're a city councillor here. You must be well aware that the relocation of the station due to the elevated track construction has doubled the value of our apartment, right?" Tony seemed taken aback for a moment, but then Kristen interjected eagerly. "If you know that, then let's make this quick, shall we? That apartment is part of the inheritance, so we should be paid our share in cash." As the lawyer began to speak about the apartment, I silenced him with a look and asked in a serious tone, "Your share? What are you talking about?" Kristen, now visibly angry, retorted, "Don't play dumb. Even if you remarried him, that father of ours is still our father, so of course, we have a right to the inheritance." The lawyer and I could only offer a faint smile in response. Sensing something was amiss, Tony and his siblings began to realize there might be an issue, but an agitated Kristen was too worked up to notice the atmosphere. Growing increasingly frustrated, she shouted, "What are you laughing at? Stop joking around." The lawyer, clearly fed up, stated firmly, "Indeed, if you were Daniel's biological children or legally adopted, you would be entitled to an inheritance, but you are neither." He then laid out the family registry documents on the table. It seemed Tony and his siblings couldn't grasp the situation immediately and frantically started to examine the documents laid out before them. However, once they realized that only Daniel's marriage and divorce with Angela and his subsequent marriage to me and Kyle being registered as his son were documented, they started shouting, "What does this mean?" As I watched their reaction, I remembered the letter Daniel had sent 2 weeks after his passing. In front of Daniel's portrait, I felt an odd sensation as I opened a letter written in Daniel's familiar handwriting. The unsettling phrase, "Please read this hidden from my stepchildren," accompanied by an unfamiliar key and a note about its storage location, was enough to unsettle me. Following the instructions on the note immediately attached, I went to the lab at the university where Daniel worked. The seminar students quickly handed me a briefcase from a locker, saying, "The professor instructed us via email. Please, come this way." Before I could even explain myself, with trembling hands, I unlocked it and took out a set of documents which I then brought to a lawyer, who happened to be one of Daniel's former students. He smiled warmly and said, "I've been fully briefed by the professor. You don't need to worry." He then revealed the contents of the gift Daniel had left for Kyle and me at the end of his life. Daniel's final gift was something to protect Kyle and me from the greedy trio, Tony, Nathan, Kristen, and their mother, Angela. When I first checked the family registry after remarrying Daniel, I was briefly puzzled by the absence of Tony and the others' names, but I accepted Daniel's explanation that when I divorced my first wife, she remained the primary on the registry, and I left it. Since then, I had forgotten about it. However, the reality was more complex. The lawyer explained to Tony and the others, "All 3 of you were born to your mother, Angela, when she was unmarried. No formal adoption was made when she married Daniel, so you are naturally not considered next of kin." Nathan argued, "But, even so, wasn't our father responsible for us before he married our mother? If that's the case, we could still file a paternity suit." But the lawyer responded, "You can try if you must, but you realistically have no chance of winning." As he pulled out a copy of an old memorandum from underneath a stack of documents. This memorandum was an agreement made before Daniel's marriage to Angela, involving her parents and Daniel. As it states here, your biological father was a married businessman. Your mother, having failed to secure a marriage with him after having you 3, was just his mistress. Angela's parents, deeply concerned about their grandchildren and wayward daughter's future, turned to Daniel, a distant relative, for help. At that time, Daniel was just a poorly paid university lecturer struggling to support himself. After his father passed away young, his mother, a single mother, had raised him but was now sick and in financial trouble. Therefore, Angela's parents offered to financially assist Daniel if he would marry Angela and accept the 3 children as his stepchildren. Although his bedridden mother opposed the idea, likening it to selling oneself, Daniel agreed to the proposal. However, after his mother passed away shortly thereafter, Daniel, having repaid the financial assistance, sought to dissolve his marriage to Angela. The agreement now before us showed that, according to this, your grandparents agreed to the divorce but requested that it be kept a secret that you were not Daniel's biological children, and instead be treated as such. Why would they do something so complicated? And who knows, maybe our mother and father were involved when we were conceived. The lawyer then explained that Angela was pregnant with Tony and Kristen around the time Daniel was studying abroad, with no records of him returning during that period. Moreover, based on Nathan's own blood type, it was highly unlikely that Daniel was his biological father, a fact Nathan, being in the medical field, had to accept reluctantly. However, Kristen, still unconvinced, threatened. Just give us the money already. If you don't, who knows what might happen to your position at work. In fact, after being turned down for a job referral by me, Kristen had gotten a job on her own merits at a subsidiary of the bank I worked for but had been spreading nasty rumors about me within the company. Eventually, these rumors reached my bank, and for a time, put me in a difficult position, but thanks to the support of my junior colleagues, I managed to get through unscathed. Additionally, a few of Daniel's former students who had heard the rumors advised him of my situation, helping him realize the schemes of Tony and the others. How ironic. Don't worry about that. I've sent a detailed document explaining how you've been spreading baseless rumors, right before this meeting, to your fiancé Ryan, through our lawyer. As I informed an agitated Kristen, her face turned pale instantly. What have you done? Ryan's father is the president of the company I work for. What will happen if the engagement is called off? I simply stated. That's the result of your own actions. Since you convinced the president to remove me from handling his company's affairs based on your lies, the bank has officially filed a complaint. With that, Kristen, like the other two, slumped in her chair, muttering. It's over. Afterward, the three of them faced a dramatic downfall. Before this incident, Tony was engaged to a prominent councilman's daughter, nearly finalizing the marriage and securing a political legacy, but suddenly, everything was called off. Tony, originally poised to become a secretary for a regional assemblyman and son-in-law of a leading construction company owner, had to resign suddenly as a city councilman, leading to unexpected unemployment. There was no unemployment benefit for former assemblyman, and despite the anticipation of a high-paying position in his father-in-law's top-ranking construction company, Tony indulged in extravagant spending with his remaining bachelor freedom, leading to debts that soon chased him for repayment. Desperate, Tony pleaded everywhere. Please. Can you spare about $50,000? I'll pay it back as soon as I make it big. However, no one was willing to lend money to a sinking ship, especially knowing his substantial debts. Ultimately, after much running around, Tony had no choice but to declare bankruptcy. Of course, bankruptcy did not strip him of his eligibility to be elected, but his prior arrogant behavior and claims of aiming for higher political office left few willing to assist him, and pride hindered his job search until he eventually vanished from his hometown. Later, rumors surfaced of seeing him in a city's homeless district or lining up for soup kitchens, but their truth was uncertain. Meanwhile, Nathan, the younger son and a recent medical school graduate after 5 years as an intern, had just secured a job at a general hospital. He often declared his freedom from family medical obligations, saying, "I want to be with someone I truly love." This led to revelations of relationships with over 5 women, including married ones, primarily from hospital staff, causing chaos and breakdowns in workplace relationships, resulting in his termination and tarnished reputation among local doctors for unreliability and creating serious hospital management issues. Furthermore, the burden of repaying student loans and education loans from his university days worsened, and the husband of one of his married partners demanded compensation, threatening legal action if not complied with, forcing Nathan into more debt. Complicating matters, one of the women's relatives turned out to have a dangerous profession, frequently intimidating Nathan at his home. How dare you mess with her? How will you settle this? This led to his coerced employment at a notorious local hospital to pay off the compensation. Nathan is being pushed to the limits with overtime work at the hospital, but most of his salary is consumed by debt and loan repayments, leaving him with very little. He once called my workplace, apologizing profusely and begging for help, but I did not respond, and the call ended with him sobbing. As for Kristen, her fiancé, Ryan, broke off their engagement and demanded compensation. Later, Ryan and his parents visited, explaining how his biological father had abandoned his mother and siblings when he was young. Although they did not struggle financially thanks to the wealth of his mother's family, it led to a lonely childhood, which he shared to gain Ryan's sympathy. Furthermore, Kristen said, "Although Megan is the second wife of my biological father, she seems extremely opposed to me and my siblings interacting with him, perhaps to protect her half-brother born from their union. Kristen tearfully claimed that Megan had been cruel to her and had spread baseless rumors about her. Back then, I couldn't see through all of Kristen's lies. I told her to change jobs if she was suffering so much. Kristen, however, bravely continued. No, it's okay. Megan isn't a monster, I'm sure she'll understand my feelings someday. Convincing not just Ryan but also his parents. However, the truth of Kristen's nature and Angela's heartfelt complaints about how Megan and Daniel had made their lives miserable came to light after the incident, changing the family's perspective. If that incident hadn't happened, I would have married Kristen and taken in that mother as told. I can't imagine what would have happened then. The family then apologized deeply for their past actions, and Ryan's father, as a gesture of taking responsibility, sent an email to business associates explaining the situation, stating, "It was us, the parents, who brought personal issues into the business. We deeply apologize to Megan and want to take responsibility." He stepped down as president, and Ryan was demoted from his position to a regular employee. As a result of their stern self-criticism, the family's situation became widely known, leading to a backlash against Kristen, the main cause of the turmoil. Unable to remain at her workplace, Kristen faced the financial burden of the broken engagement, including compensation, engagement gifts, wedding preparations, and luxury loans like bridal beauty treatments. Unable to rely on her brothers, Kristen sought help from Angela, her mother, who had exploited others' kindness and sympathy to live but had no intention of helping her daughter. Angela eventually sold off the remaining family assets and disappeared without telling anyone, likely to face the same dismal fate as her children. Meanwhile, Kristen, left alone, is now working tirelessly day and night to repay her debts and sustain herself. On the other hand, I sold that apartment, which was one of the causes of the turmoil. We found a more suitable apartment near the high school Kyle wishes to attend, and we decided to move there. Though I felt guilty about making Kyle change schools in the middle of junior high, he reassured me. Some of my close friends are planning to go to the same high school, so it's fine. Sure, that apartment has memories with Dad, but moving doesn't erase all those memories. Kyle has made new friends at his new school, which is a relief. Indeed, as Kyle says, memories don't just disappear with changes in time or place. What's important is that Kyle and I live happily and brightly, and we strive to show this to Daniel, who I believe watches over us from above.